Come on.
Welcome back inside the bunker. Monday, September 29th. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Bunk, coming to you weekdays for BTO Media. We have a loaded show today. A little bit of NFL to start things off. Sunday Night Football was a thriller. Absolute classic, 40-40 final score. Yeah, dissatisfying with the tie, sure, but we'll get through that game, talk about it first. We're also going to preview a little bit of Monday Night Football. I get the slate is ugly. I get that it's not a great menu with the Dolphins, Jets, and the Broncos, Bengals. But listen, if that's your biggest problem on this Monday, you're having a great start to your week. Also, we're going to recap an unbelievable finish to the MLB season. We're going to preview this awesome playoff bracket we have. Jack Sargent will join me for that probably about 15 to 20 minutes into the episode. Check the description on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, for the timestamps. If you just want to skip around the different topics, they'll all be there. But we start with Sunday Night Football, which last night I expected Dallas to win. And I'm not just saying that. You know I post all of my picks every week on the BTO Instagram and gambling account on the Outright Winners segment that I do. I post that on Thursday. I picked Dallas to win. If you listened to last week's bunker on Thursday, you would have heard me say I picked Dallas to win. And it looked like they had a really good shot for most of this game. They led a lot of the way. Offense was awesome. Dak Prescott made some huge throws. And after the first quarter, they really controlled it. We end up in a tie here, which, again, is just incredibly dissatisfying. Whether you're a fan of football, a fan of the Packers, a fan of the Cowboys, seeing that game finish the way it did is disappointing. But listen, that's the way it went. We can't change the outcome. Prescott was sensational, 319 yards, 3 touchdowns, and Jordan Love answered with 337 yards and 3 touchdowns of his own. He had a great night, and the Packers defense really had trouble getting stops in this Micah Parsons reunion, what was supposed to be a night of him shutting up a Cowboys team that hasn't looked great, what was supposed to be him saying, listen, you got rid of the wrong guy, you made a bad move trading me. On the other side of things, I actually thought we saw more of that from Kenny Clark, and that's the first place we have to go. Dallas's defense almost did enough to win the game, but again, it's almost. They almost did enough to win the game in week 1, but Philadelphia did. This defense looks awful. They almost did enough to win against Chicago, who ends up beating them by 2 scores last week, and they almost did enough to lose the game against Russell Wilson and the Giants in week 2. So the Dallas defense is a huge concern, but Kenny Clark popped last night at a few different moments, and I think this game was really personal for him because he showed up, and Chris Collinsworth said it. You talk to Kenny Clark about that trade. He was seen as a throw-in, a player swap on top of the picks, which was the really valuable asset. But this is what I'd say. You listen to what Jerry Jones says about that trade. Kenny Clark was not the throw-in. Kenny Clark was an identifiable piece that made them call the Green Bay Packers in the first place and say, if we can get this guy, then we are really excited about the potential of our defensive front. And I don't think I've seen that from Dallas where the defensive front has showed me anything. But Kenny Clark looked solid last night, and he put some respect back on his name. But the offenses were the story here. George Pickens without CeeDee Lamb had maybe the best game I've ever seen him play. 8 for 134 and 2 touchdowns. Prescott was feeding him. Schottenheimer was making sure that the plays were designed for Pickens. They did a nice enough job on the ground. Javonte Williams ran for 85 yards and a touchdown, led the way for Dallas. And I thought the play calling was really good offensively. I was clowning Schottenheimer all offseason, just absolutely ripping the hire. And I know I wasn't alone in that, but they're doing a great job on offense. This is one of the more impressive Schottenheimer offenses I've seen. And listen, it's early in the season. I get it. We just got through 4 weeks. But this offense has really impressed me. And you know I'm a big Dak Prescott guy. So when I see him go 31 of 40 for 319 yards and 3 touchdowns on Sunday Night Football against the Green Bay Packers, who are touted as a Super Bowl contender, I get excited. I really enjoy watching him play well. And I think he's a really easy guy to root for. That's almost an objective statement at this point that Dak Prescott is a great ambassador for the sport, ambassador for the Cowboys, and an easy guy to root for. When I see him perform well, it just adds to what I try to say about him all the time. And this is a franchise quarterback. This is a guy that deserved to reset the market. And on the other side, Jordan Love is kind of in that same tier, regarded a little bit differently, but I think in the same group of franchise quarterback who doesn't get the respect he deserves. And he showed up last night. This Dallas defense is awful. They're doing this to every team now, or excuse me, every team is doing this to them now, whether it's Caleb Williams, Jordan Love, Russell Wilson. Jalen Hurts didn't really in week one because they were able to run the rock and win the way they usually win, but you get the point. The Dallas defense looks really bad. Their secondary looks horrible, and the pass rush is not a thing. It doesn't exist without Micah Parsons. They could not supplement that in the amount of time they needed when they made the trade right before week one. It just wasn't going to happen. So this is about as you expected it to look. Matt Eberflus is their defensive coordinator. Talk about a guy who might lose his job at the end of this season. This could be a one-and-done DC in Dallas because he is not holding up his end of the bargain on this coaching staff, which was supposed to be kind of a co-head coach. Schottenheimer calls the shots but runs the offense. Eberflus handles the defense. He doesn't have great players, but he's not holding up his end of the bargain, not elevating this team at all. So you go through this whole game and the ebbs and flows of this one, which sees another Jordan Love turnover on a strip sack, the Cowboys surging, trying to close this game out, get their second win of the year, and it would be a really impressive one. You see the defense of the Green Bay Packers come up short time and time again under a great defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, and a talented group of players, Xavier McKinney, Micah Parsons, of course, Rashawn Gary, Luke Van Ness, and you just never, ever had the feeling that they were going to get a stop. You had the huge play from Prescott to, I believe it was Tolbert, in the end of the fourth, which gave Dallas the lead back in the end of the fourth quarter. Prescott off the back foot fadeaway throw about 40, 50 yards downfield to the sideline. Tolbert comes back to it, makes a great play out of bounds. Dallas scores right after, I believe it was Pickens, and then Green Bay goes down the field and kicks the field goal. So there was everything in this game. Special teams for Dallas came up big. Special teams for Green Bay really comes up big late with the two McManus field goals, but they were not good all night. A syndrome that the Packers have had under Matt LaFleur, who has tried to fix the special teams issue. They lost that playoff game to San Francisco. They hired Rich Bisaccia, who is an incredible special teams coach, former interim coach with the Raiders. But the Packers have never really been able to figure this out and get it consistent on the special teams. That's something to watch this year. It's a storyline to watch with Green Bay because it always is. So if they do it over and over again, I tend to continue to watch it and continue to expect them to make some blunders there and for it to be a weakness. But Dallas exploited it. Dallas did a good job in the return game last night. And for Green Bay, you can't help but leave this game feeling as if they are not a Super Bowl team. If you didn't feel that way after the Cleveland game last week, which could have been an overreaction because you had a team at Cleveland in an obvious trap game lose, then you can write it off and say, all right, they go to 3-1 next week, and in the first month of the season, they have one loss on the road against a team that really needed one, that was really desperate, that has a great defense, and you write it off. But now you tie with Dallas, and you start to feel a little queasy about your Green Bay Packers, who are now in second place in the NFC North after a 2-0 start, including beating the Lions. Detroit's 3-1. Packers 2-1-1. That's not good enough for first place. You're in second now. Detroit looks better since week one when the Packers beat them. Detroit's won 3 straight games here. So I'm not into the Packers Super Bowl bandwagon. I wasn't after week one either. If you watch the Sunday recap, Michael Merlo had the Packers as the best team in football. He said they look like the best team in the league. And that was not an uncommon take or a crazy one after the Micah Parsons trade and after a 2-0 start beating Detroit and then Washington on a short week. Wasn't a crazy take. But now they're 0-1-1 on the road in their 2 road games. They won both of their wins at home. And I can't help but think Green Bay is just another wild card team that maybe wins one round. Early overreaction for sure, but they can't stop the run. Their defense does not look terrific, and the Cowboys did whatever they wanted last night. And this is a Dallas team where the consensus before this week is that they're not very good. They're not a playoff team. And on the flip, yeah, Green Bay regresses in my mind in this one, but Dallas does look like a potential 7 seed. Looks like maybe them and Chicago and some of those fringe teams in these tougher divisions where the winners are set. Seattle would be another one. San Francisco would be another one. These fringe kind of teams, you're saying, you know what? They could get a 7 seed. Dallas impressed me last night. Their offense is great. Again, even without CeeDee Lamb last night, they rise to the occasion. Tie game. I wish there was a loss here for somebody. I wish Dallas ended up winning on that final play of the game before the McManus game-tying field goal in overtime, because Love, that operation was nuts. When they have no timeouts left in about 25 seconds, they take a lot of time getting to the line of scrimmage. They get a snap-off with about 7 seconds left. Love fires for the end zone. Incomplete. Ball hits the ground with 1 second left. So that was almost the game right there. It felt like in the middle of that play, it was going to be game right there. And they get enough time. They decide, let's play for the tie, get the extra point, or you get the field goal, and just head out of here 40-40. It's also a scoreagami. The score has never happened before. A 40-40 tie is a ridiculous score to have in a game. But this was a really good one. An absolute classic on Sunday Night Football. And again, for Green Bay, it's not a good night. It's not a night where you're happy that you left with a tie. Neither is that the feeling for Dallas, but I just can't help but think this is a loss for Green Bay. To go into a place where you've won so many games, the Micah Parsons get-back game against Dallas, didn't feel like a win for the Packers. It doesn't feel like a tie for the Packers. It felt like a loss. And I want to remind you guys of probably a decade ago now, Chuck Pagano was in a situation with the Colts where they could have tied the game and left the game with a tie in overtime. And he went for it. Went for the score from a pretty decent distance out. It was 4th and long. And he went for it. And after the game, he says, I don't do ties. I'm playing a win or lose. I don't do a tie. Green Bay, I think, should have went for the end zone last night. And I know it would come back to bite them in the race for the division. I know that LaFleur makes the fundamentally correct move here. The irrational move that I would make is we're throwing one up to the end zone, and I'm not leaving here with a tie. I hate that you can tie in the NFL. I liked the concept of the idea that Russell Wilson had probably 6 years ago now when he was still in Seattle that said we shouldn't have ties. We should have a kickoff after overtime. If you're tied, the kickers go out and they have to each kick 3 balls from 45, 55, and then 60. And whoever misses one, it's kind of like an NHL shootout. You miss one before the other makes one, and you win the game or you lose the game. And I love that idea, or just that concept of we have to have some sort of a shootout after overtime because ties in the NFL are ridiculous. It's awful. It should not be a thing. And that also adds a lot of value to special teams and to the kicker position if you were able to do something like that. So, summary from this game, I know I was all over the place. Both defenses stunk. Both defenses might not be very good. They might not be elite defenses. The Packers' defense certainly feels like it regressed, which is a problem if you gave up 2 first-round picks for the Defensive Player of the Year favorite before the season, and your defense is worse than it was last year. Last year, they were 7th in scoring defense. This year, they're not trending to be top 15, and that is a concern. But Dallas's offense is the real deal also. 420 yards per game of offense for the Cowboys. That's the best in the league. They're the 32nd ranked defense in the NFL. So we've seen this story throughout Prescott's career where he has defenses who really struggle to keep them in games, to win them games. This, again, it feels like a loss for both teams because Green Bay is playing a team they're better than, and you tie, and Dallas is playing a team that they are not better than. At home, you put up 40 points and have the lead late in the 4th and late in overtime, and you tie. It feels like a loss both ways. Both teams needed one in the win column here. Dallas is 1-2-1. How much worse is that than 2-2? I think a lot. And Green Bay, instead of being 3-1 and in first place, Detroit's now 3-1. Green Bay's 2-1-1. It's an ugly record to have when you're in one of the toughest divisions in football. But we'll wrap on that game. I know I was all over, but again, in summary, both defenses are bad. Both quarterbacks are good. Maybe not great, but good. Both offenses are better than we give them credit for. And I was really impressed with the ability to score last night, and quite the opposite defensively for these teams. And Green Bay's got to get their special teams figured out. Monday Night Football tonight. It's a really ugly slate. Jets, Dolphins kicks things off at 7:15. Here's a stat for you, why I picked the Dolphins to win this game in the pick'em. Tua Tagovailoa, 6-0 with 8 touchdowns and a 73% completion percentage versus the Jets in his career. They have never beaten him. They go on the road to Miami, a place where the Jets and the rest of the AFC East historically struggle. And I think Miami really needs this one. And they're on a long week. They played on Thursday Night Football in week 3. And now they're on Monday Night Football, literally the longest possible break you can have without a bye. Mike McDaniel has absolutely torched this Jets defense for years. I think that they game plan for the worst Jets defense that they've seen in this tenure between Tua and McDaniel, and they're going to win this game, put up 30-plus points. People will feel better about their Dolphins in fantasy football after tonight, and I can't see the Jets going blow for blow with them. Justin Fields really struggles to win games that go high scoring. Most of his wins are in the 17-10 range, that ugly 13-10 final bad weather game where it's a lot of pound the rock, defense goes back and forth. And this Jet defense has just been letting down their offense and their entire team the entire season so far. Through 3 weeks, the defense has been horrible, one of the worst 4 in football. And it feels like they're due for another bad game tonight on the road at Miami, who once again had, almost 12 days to get ready for this game. And the Jets are the perfect team for Miami to step in against, a team that they'll have confidence against because they beat them always, and the Jets are the bottom feeder of that division. So it's a perfect matchup for Miami to break the ice and get their first win of the season. And on the other side of things, for New York, Aaron Glenn, who's 0-3 in his first 3 games with the Jets, the fan base has no patience. They already had no patience before the season started. You move to 0-4 and leave September without a win, dropping a game to your rival Dolphins, who are just an absolute train wreck right now. It's a horrible look. And next week you have Dallas. They put up 40 against the Green Bay defense. They might put up 80 against the Jet defense. So you have to be worried about the Jets. With a loss tonight, their season's obviously over. They're not a playoff team regardless of tonight's outcome. But there's a path to relevance throughout November because their schedule's so easy. And if you lose tonight, that path to relevance is dead. So we will see the outcome here. Both coaches, I think, really need a win. And I think it's going to be Miami tonight. And then in the other game, I don't really have much to say about Cincinnati at Denver, except the Broncos have to kill them. The Broncos have to blow out the Bengals in this game. Confidence is down around the league on Denver. You need to come in here and absolutely smoke the Cincinnati Bengals, who lost by 40 to a Carson Wentz-led Vikings team who couldn't score against Pittsburgh this week, whose defense has struggled. It is so obvious that Cincinnati without Burrow is one of the 3 worst teams in the league. If you don't take care of them tonight, the concerns and cries about Denver early in this season will only be magnified. They absolutely have to find a way to win this game by 2 or 3 touchdowns at home. Defense has to show up and be great. You match up perfectly with Cincinnati's offense. Even if Burrow is healthy, you match up to compete and shut them down. Now it's Jake Browning, who couldn't move the ball last week against Minnesota, who was a turnover machine last week against Minnesota, an offense that looked inept and looked just completely heartless last week without Joe Burrow. It's time for Denver to have that first big win of the year at 1-2. They need to get to 2-2. The division will get so far away from you. The wild card will get so far away from you in this AFC if you don't win this game and you fall to 1-3 with Bo Nix struggling in his sophomore year. Their offensive line's been great. Their defense has been very good. Cincinnati should be the perfect punching bag for them tonight in a get-right game. Hopefully one of these games are close. I think the Jet-Dolphin game will be close. I don't think the second game will be. I don't think it should be. And we will see the results. But on the other side, we're going to talk a little bit of baseball with Jack Sargent, go through the playoff bracket, and recap, what was a really exciting season with a ton of great storylines in Major League Baseball. Joined now by Jack Sargent. Go through a little bit of the MLB wrap-up. We'll preview some of it. Just a reminder, tomorrow I'll be doing the full playoff bracket dive with Michael Merlo. We'll be doing a Burrows tomorrow live at 10 o'clock. But for now, we're going to preview this stuff, recap the weekend, talk a little bit about the AL MVP race at the end. But we got to start with the Mets here, and then we'll go to the Giants, who broke news today firing Melvin. But the Mets, Sarge, a team that you saw in the NLCS last year, missed the playoffs. And, I mean, just the last 12 months, unbelievable saga of events. They go to the NLCS, they're 2 wins from the World Series. They don't get there. They sign Juan Soto. He's a top 4 MVP finisher, and they miss the playoffs in a year you needed to win 84 games to get in. I just unbelievable. Where do you start with the Mets?
I mean, Kevin, I texted this to you yesterday, but maybe I texted it to Mike. I can't remember whether I texted you or Mike or both of you, but I can't believe it actually happened. Like, the entire time during this collapse, like, I was saying to myself, yes, this is bad. The Mets are pathetic right now, but they'll get in. It's the Reds. Their competition is the Reds. It looks bad. They're going to fall their way into the playoffs, and they'll probably get bounced early, but they'll get in. There's no way that they can miss the playoffs when you need to win 84 games to get in. I'm surprised that it actually happened.
When you came on with us, probably, 6 weeks ago now, you were on with us, and I had said for the first time this season, I said if they miss the playoffs, I'm firing Carlos Mendoza. I don't see, now that we're actually here and they missed it, a way he survives this. And immediately after they lost last night, the tweet from Andy Martino with SNY was a lot of changes coming to the Mets coaching staff. So whether that's Mendoza losing the guys around him and having to replace them, or him being relieved, I don't know how you run it back with them. And then there's questions for David Stearns too. Where are you with the kind of, case study of those two guys and their roles in this collapse?
I mean, maybe I'm being a little bit skewed by what you and Mike had to say last week, but I don't think you can fire David Stearns because you've committed so much to him, and he had one bad offseason. The pitching just wasn't there. It was everything this year for the Mets. There's a 9.5-minute video on Twitter right now of at-bats in situational at-bats in games that the Mets didn't come through, or errors and things. It isn't even pitching. And I don't even know how many games it spanned across, but it was ridiculous. The number of times that the Mets had a chance to win 2 additional games that didn't do it. But I'm skeptical on if firing Mendoza is going to bring the desired changes. And I understand the need for a scapegoat. And if they decide to scapegoat Carlos Mendoza, it makes sense. I just don't know what positive that's going to bring.
I can get behind that too and say I don't think it actually changes too much. I think the tough thing with Mendoza is he's got 1 year left on his contract. So in baseball, we understand how it works. The managers don't want to manage without having more than a year on the contract. They want the extension before the final season. It's usually how it goes. And there's an interesting group of guys this year with 1 year left on their deal that I think the Mets could pivot to appease the fan base, whether that's Kevin Cash, whether that's Torey Lovello. So I don't know if they're able to keep Mendoza here. I don't know if I blame him for everything either. But, man, I just can't wrap my head around. Like, imagine sitting here in March and saying the cutoff line is going to be the Reds at 83 and 79. You got to be better to get into the playoffs. And the Mets weren't.
I mean, if you said in March of 2025, the baseline for the National League is going to be 83 wins, and you're going to be and you're going to have to outcompete the Reds. And I'm a Mets fan. I'm saying, okay, we got that by worst case scenario, 5 games.
Yeah. Like 83 wins a year after going to the NLCS and adding Juan Soto and staying healthy. I mean, this is the most incredible part is Lindor, Alonso, Soto, Nimmo. For the most part, this team was healthy all year, and they just didn't have the roster, which obviously pitching was terrible. And then the deadline moves completely exploded in their face with Ryan Helsley, who will never wear a Mets uniform again. And they go into an offseason now. I'll ask you this before we move on. I hate to do like the offseason stuff right now, but Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz are both going to be free agents. Alonso wasted no time last night saying he was going to go opt out and hit the open market. Do you think he plays another game for the Mets?
I don't know who wants him. I don't know who's going to give him the money that he wants. And I'm kind of like trying to not steal what Mike Merlo was saying about this on his podcast with his cousin this morning that I was listening to. But I just don't really see the market for him. He's weaker for me. He's a weaker Kyle Schwarber, and I don't love home run only first baseman, especially getting later in their careers, committing a lot of money to them. Me personally, I wouldn't even. We're not having this conversation right now, but I wouldn't give a massive contract to Kyle Schwarber, and I wouldn't give one to Pete Alonso either. But I think at the end of the day, he's probably back because I don't know what his market is.
And I think the only thing that will keep him from coming back, if it's the case, I do agree with you, I don't think there's a market, is if David Stearns and Steve Cohen decide to say, we want to shake things up a little bit. We really like Josh Naylor or somebody else of that ilk, and we want to just add some average, add a lefty first baseman, and he provides us with a guy at a lower AAV than we probably want to spend, and still productive player. So that's the only reason, is if they have a preference other than Alonso, because I don't think he's going to go out there and find this 5-year contract similar to Alex Bregman this past offseason, was a very different case, but I don't think he goes out there and finds this 5-year deal that actually similar to Pete Alonso this past offseason. Like, it's going to be the same thing.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I would be with Pete Alonso. It's not going to be there, and he might have to go back to the Mets. Do you think he'd come back on a 1-year deal, something like he did this year?
I think he wouldn't, because I think they're at a point now where the relationship is going to be Alonso saying, I'm not just going to keep being your easy option at first base. I want the commitment from you or I'm out, because there are some rumblings. Buster Olney was the first guy, or maybe it was Ken Rosenthal 2 weeks ago, to really raise the red flag that maybe there's some clubhouse issues with the Mets. And I do think Alonso may have taken the Soto sweepstakes and attention personally this offseason as a homegrown record-holding Met. So I don't know if there's a path to him coming back short-term. Unless the AAV is crazy. Unless it's like Bregman, the 3 for 120 with opt-outs after every year. But before we go to the Giants quick, since we're talking about the Mets, you, a Dodgers guy, we'll discuss the series in depth in a moment, but you get the Reds in round 1 here. The Reds are a team I picked to win the NL Central. I'm not bragging about that today because they're in the playoffs, but I picked them to win the NL Central. They fall 14 games back of the NL Central lead of first place, but they're in the postseason. They're in the dance. Francona did a terrific job this year. They're the first team in MLB history to make the postseason with no qualifying batter hitting 270, nobody hitting 25 home runs, no pitcher winning 15 games, and no pitcher with 200 strikeouts. An incredible, incomparable, improbable appearance in the postseason. What do you think of this Reds playoff team?
Can I be cynical for a moment?
Of course.
I think you might know where I'm going to go. For most of baseball history, the 6th best team in the league, in either league, did not make the playoffs. So I'm not complaining about expanded playoff format, but when you dilute the playoff field, you're going to have teams like this get in. 5 years ago, this never would have been a conversation. This would have been a mid-Cincinnati Reds team. And that's one of the consequences. And that's why they expanded the playoffs, to give fan bases like this a chance to get in. The Reds were playing meaningful baseball. The Diamondbacks were playing meaningful baseball. The Mets were playing meaningful baseball. But the Reds can pitch. They can pitch the heck out of the ball. Their lineup's not great. I am pretty confident. We'll obviously get into the full thing with the series in a few moments. But overall, I mean, it's good for Cincinnati. I would not be disappointed to see the Reds win a playoff series, because it's been so long for that franchise to have any kind of success at anything. But they just kind of took advantage of the fact that every other team in the National League wildcard race didn't want to get in. The Mets didn't want to get in. The Diamondbacks didn't want to get in. The Giants didn't want to get in. The Reds really tried to not get in themselves. I don't know if you saw the South Park video at all from the Little League episode where...
No, I haven't yet. I heard about it this morning.
Yeah, no, there's an episode where the two teams are yelling at each other. We want to lose more. No, we want to lose more. That's what the National League wildcard race was. Good for them that they got in. I hope that Cincinnati's able to have some good playoff moments before the Dodgers beat them in 3 games. But my cynical take is, most baseball seasons, the 6th best team in the league did not get in. So that's why the Reds are the first ever, because this is unprecedented.
The NL wildcard race really has embodied the potential and the both problems and positives with the 16 playoff, because you hit it on the head. The 5th worst team, or the 5th best team, so the worst, second worst record, whatever, in the NL postseason is the Padres, who won 90 games. and the Reds 183 and the Mets 183, this wild card race would not have existed for the last 2 weeks, or really for the last 6 weeks, because of how far behind those two teams have been, 7-8 games all year behind San Diego and Chicago. This wild card race wouldn't even have existed, and we'd just be getting Cubs-Padres tomorrow night instead of the 3-game sets. And I'm totally fine with the expanded postseason, but I'll get to some problems with the bracket and stuff, especially in the American League. But yeah, I think that you hit it on the head there. We won't go any further. Do you want to do Giants, Melvin now, or do you want to just go right into the Dodgers series and we can hit Melvin later?
I actually want to do Giants Melvin now. Can I just say one thing quickly, Kevin? Yeah. And I'm at peace with the fact that it's gone, but we really should be playing game 163 today.
I agree.
2 game 163s. You guys should be playing the Blue Jays for a division title, and the Mets and the Reds should have Hunter Green and whoever the Mets ace is going to save the season. And I put air quotes, or I was out of the picture when I did the air quotes with ace, but we should have 2 game 163s today. Just wanted to make that point.
I do agree with you. And as a Yankee fan, I would really give a lot today to say, yeah, I'd like to see Max Fried on a Monday in Toronto because they had that tiebreaker. I would absolutely risk it for game 163 to get the 4 days off versus having to play in the wild card round, which the wild card round, whether it's 3 games or 1 game, has always been absolute hell as a fan to have to endure. And somehow, I mean, you have been lucky to not see many wild card rounds in your life as a Dodgers fan, but I saw a few in the early Judge years when Boston was great and they'd win the division and Toronto had Batista. The 3-game set is almost more frightening than the 1-gamer, because 1 game, it was just, for me, it was always, you're at Yankee Stadium, your best guys pitching, Tanaka or Severino are pitching against, whether it's Boston this year, it would be Boston or Detroit or Minnesota. The 3-game set is like frightening. I've never been in one since the expanded playoffs, so this is frightening stuff.
It's new for me too. Very quickly, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I want to say most of the rule changes that have happened in baseball, Manfred's got right. At the end of the day, I think expanded playoffs is better for the sport. Obviously, universal DH is good. Teams playing each other, every team playing everybody's good. Most of the rule changes that Manfred has made is good. This is the one that I think he got wrong. I think tiebreaker games should have stayed, because you can't tell me that Max Fried going up into Toronto trying to get the top seed in the American League in a game 163 would not be good for baseball, would not get eyeballs on the sport. And then the Mets trying one last time to stop this desperate collapse of all collapses. You can't tell me that wouldn't be good for baseball. And I know that it would mess up with things with the networks and whatnot, but come on, guys, you can figure it out. This is the one thing that Manfred got wrong.
And the other thing that bothers me, and then we'll move off of it, is in the postseason picture, you saw it firsthand last year with the division series, but it really annoys me that there's no potential reseeding ever, because the Padres should not have been playing the Dodgers before the championship series last year, and the Yankees should not be playing Toronto before the championship series this year if they get by Boston, while Seattle has a chance to play Detroit this weekend. I mean, no reseeding is just horrible for the 1 seeds.
Exactly. And, you're getting a cakewalk for Seattle's going to beat whoever they face because it's the AL Central. And your point from Batter's Box 2 years ago, Kevin, rings as true today as it does then. I'm going to go out on a limb. 5 Central teams in the playoffs between the American and National League teams. None of them are playing in a championship series.
It's possible none of them play it. Well, one of them have to, but besides Cleveland, Detroit, I don't think anyone in the NL even wins. We'll get to it in a minute, though. We'll get to it in a minute when we break those down. Let's go to Melvin here. Giants fire Melvin today. I was surprised it happened right away after the season ended, but I can understand why it did. You get a firsthand look at that division. What went wrong with San Fran this year?
San Francisco has been in denial for the last 7 seasons. Ever since the last playoff year of the Posey, Sandoval, Belt, Crawford, Bumgarner run ended in 2016 by the Cubs, the Giants have been deluding themselves that they can still compete. And I went back and I looked at the rosters pre-COVID, and they were still pretty much the same group of dudes that were on that 2016 team that lost to the Cubs in the NLDS. And the worst thing that has happened to the San Francisco Giants franchise in a long time is that 2021 season. It is the biggest aberration in the history of baseball how that team won 100 games. And I'm not going to get into the fact that, they won the division on a blown check swing call, whatever. That's not important. The Giants won 107 games that year, and they said to themselves, we can compete effectively in a National League that is National League West that is loaded with stars, because that next offseason, the Padres loaded up. The Dodgers have been perpetually loaded. And they said, yeah, we can go up against the $1 billion Padres and the $1 billion Dodgers with Wilmer Flores and Lamont Wade and Mike Yastrzemski. Logan Webb's elite. I'm not going to dog Logan Webb for that. But the Giants did that. And the last 4 seasons, they have been the definition of mid. 2 500 finishes in 22 and 25, a game under 500 last year, and then 79 and 83 in 2023. And they have no direction because they have fired a manager or general manager in the last 3 seasons. Fired Gabe Kapler at the end of 23, fired Farhan Zaidi last year. Now they fire Bob Melvin. This is a team that needs to rebuild. They needed to say at the end of 2023, this roster is aging. We do not have a future going forward, especially not against the Dodgers and the Padres. They needed to tear it down, but they deluded themselves into thinking we can still compete. And now they've made commitments that the banker's knocking at the door. That's not Juan Soto. That Rafael Devers trade is looking more and more like a mistake. Willie Adames didn't work out. Matt Chapman has been average, and those guys are not getting any younger. The rest of the roster doesn't exist. Logan Webb is quickly exiting his prime. They have no direction, and you are quite convincingly the 4th best team in your division, and you are miles away from the Dodgers and from the Padres.
I can't believe we're sitting here right now, similar to the Mets 12-month calendar this past 12 months versus, the Giants last 5 months, where I remember getting on a podcast live the night that Devers was traded, and Boston felt like they had just punted on the postseason. Like they were just having that tough start to the year, and they decided we're going to let these young guys play, and we're not going to really commit to Devers anymore. We're not going to put up with Devers anymore. We're going to let the young guys play. We're all right with missing the playoffs this year. Boston ends up winning 8 more games than San Francisco, who that night felt like they jumped into contender status, and they're out of the postseason. The Red Sox are in the postseason, and the Devers contract is one that you are devastated is on your books.
Fantastic. I'm going to say right now, fantastic move by Craig Breslow to unload all of that. Rafael Devers did not hit 1 point above his weight this season in San Francisco. He hit 236, and he's listed at 235. So congratulations. You took on that whole contract until 2034 for a guy who has his problems as far as personality-wise. You're locked into that guy until 2034. Good luck getting out of that. By the way, you're a franchise that has no direction going forward. I love it because I can't stand the Giants, and I can just cross them off and say, okay, they're not going to be a threat. The Padres are going to be the annoying team for the next decade.
Have you seen the Bob Nightingale tweet from this morning right after the Melvin firing that speculates maybe Posey goes after Bochy and tries to just go all in with the money they have on the books the next 2 or 3 years? I definitely think Posey will reach out to Bochy if he hasn't already. I don't think that ends up happening, but definitely an interesting possibility in San Francisco.
Yeah, that I hadn't seen that, and that just feels to me like it would be trying to do something that you're trying to make something work that just doesn't have a prayer in hell of working.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And you really want to find somebody at a franchise of that status that'll be there long term. I don't really want to go for the 3-year Bruce Bochy attempt. We already had the success with Bochy. Let's just move on and try to find somebody else. Maybe Kevin Cash is a guy for that job, and you try for another manager who has had success elsewhere with a smaller budget. And, it didn't work with Melvin. Melvin didn't work out in San Diego either, though. So now you got to pivot. And I think Kevin Cash is a fit here in San Francisco, but we'll see what they do.
Yeah, I would also say I don't think it's a bad idea if they try to make a run at Torey Lovello, but overall, there are deep problems with this roster, and I don't think a manager is going to fix that. And I don't want to be the guy who walks into this situation because we're going to be at best the third best team in the division, and we're going to be staring up at two franchises that have more talent than us than we can even hope to replace.
Let's jump to the postseason picture and these first round matchups. We already went a little bit into Cincinnati, LA, but we'll just start there. I think this series goes 3. I could see it ending in 2. I do not see an outcome where Cincinnati beats the Dodgers. But then again, we've seen crazier things happen with the 6 seeds now in this expanded playoff. The Dodgers definitely have to be on their best game. I think that Cincinnati might get the good pitching game from Green and maybe steal that one. But I can't see the Dodgers losing the series.
I really can't either. And I have been very down on the Dodgers bullpen this entire since the All-Star break. The Dodgers bullpen has been terrible. Kirby Yates and Tanner Scott and the other bullpen moves from this offseason have blown up in the Dodgers' face. But starting pitching has been elite. And at the end of the day, if you're going to get I want to feel confident saying this, but I have seen leads get blown that I just did not think possible to get blown down the stretch this season. But you have very favorable pitching matchups in this. Obviously, you're going to have to go up against Hunter Green, but having Snell, Yamamoto, and Shohei Ohtani lined up in a 3-game series, I would be very surprised if you don't get quality starts from all 3 of those guys. And at the end of the day, if you get the quality start, 7+ innings, I know the official stat for quality start is 6 innings, but if you give me 7 innings from all 3 of those guys, or Ohtani gets a good amount of time, and then they play around with the bullpen from there. I think that I agree with you, Kevin. I think this series probably goes 3 games, but I'd be very surprised to see the Dodgers not win this series.
What's been a kind of under the radar storyline this year is Ohtani's pitching. How great he was pitching this season, 2.8 ERA in 47 innings. And I know that it's not the sample size that you would want, but I mean, this guy going into the postseason, you feel like you have a top 2 or 3 guy in any rotation.
Exactly. And he was being eased back in, coming off of Tommy John, whatever. So that was kind of expected. But yeah, he has been the Shohei Ohtani that you paid the money you paid him for on the pitching side. He's absolutely been that offensively. And even if Shohei Ohtani didn't throw another pitch the rest of his life, that contract would still have been worth it. But this is why you commit as much money as you do to Shohei Ohtani.
Absolutely. So you don't see the Dodgers losing the series. I don't either. Again, who knows? You've had your traumas with the Dodgers in October, and we've seen them fall short against teams they shouldn't. But the other side in the NL is really interesting, the Padres and Cubs, because these are your 2 teams that were, the true wild card squads this year, and they'd be playing that 1-gamer if the expanded playoff didn't exist. I don't know where to go with this series. I think the Padres will win, but on the road at Wrigley is not going to be a cakewalk for San Diego.
No, and the Padres had plenty of chances to catch the Dodgers down the stretch in September. The Padres have been it hasn't been covered enough because there's been the Mets collapsing and the Tigers collapsing, but the Padres did not play great baseball in September. They had a chance to catch the Dodgers because the Dodgers were losing series to teams like the Orioles and the Rockies, and the Padres were losing games at around the same time the Dodgers were losing games. So the Dodgers almost blew the NL West. But the Padres just couldn't capitalize. And that's why I'm a little bit apprehensive here. Also, your old adage, I'm predisposed to say the NL Central is always going to lose. But playoff Wrigley is a different beast. But I got to take, at the end of the day, I got to take the better roster. And I got San Diego winning this series.
Yeah, San Diego feels like a better team. And you just don't know what you're going to get from the top bats on Chicago. You don't know what Kyle Tucker you'd be getting. You don't know what PCA you'd be getting. I just can't trust Chicago this year with everything I saw in the second half to say that they are really a huge threat to not only get out of this round, but to get through the NL. The most interesting storyline for me is the Brewers in the NL. And how great are they actually? They had the incredible summer. September, they were not this powerhouse team still, but still winning baseball. Do you think the Brewers should be the favorite in this National League? Who do you, if you had to rank the top 3 or 4, where does Milwaukee fall?
Milwaukee falls behind the Dodgers. I have been the last couple of weeks on WCCU radio here at Coastal. I have been saying the Brewers are frauds. They have played 500 baseball in August and September. I was very skeptical of the Brewers the entire season, and I have full on locked into Brewers are frauds.
I think so too. Would you put them behind the Dodgers, but the Phillies are ahead of them also? Or the Phillies are one, or the Dodgers are
The
one?
Phillies are my one. The Phillies are my one, and the Dodgers are my two, and the Padres are my three. I think the Padres are a better roster than the Brewers.
I actually think if I had to rank them, and this is just off the top of my head, I really haven't given this too much thought. I think I'd go Dodgers, Phillies, Padres, Brewers. And the Brewers and Cubs are pretty close in there also. Reds obviously are the sixth team in this entire bracket. But Milwaukee's got a really interesting storyline and a lot of pressure on them in this postseason after leading the league in wins. Let's go to the American League. Yankees, Red Sox. I mean, it's going to be, I think, the most watched of the first round series. I'm very nervous for it, as I mentioned earlier, but it should be a fun series. Crochet Fried starts things off tomorrow night. Do you think Boston's got a big advantage in this because of the history between the two?
I want to say that, but I just, the Red Sox kind of, it's less drastic in the American League, but the Red Sox didn't play the best baseball ever since Roman Anthony got hurt. But the history since 2004 is kind of nagging at me when I think about this series, that Boston has had the Yankees number the last 20 years. And Garrett Crochet, you can go out and throw an elite start, give the Red Sox 7 innings, 8+ strikeouts, and all of a sudden, then you need to win one baseball game to go to the division series.
So I just read, as we're doing this, maybe 5 minutes ago, that Giolito is out for the wild card round, which is a pretty big Game 3 loss for Boston if it gets to that. Yankees would have the rookie Cam Schlittler going, so who knows what the advantage is there, but he looked really good this year. So Giolito's out. Bayo would pitch Game 2. It's a brutal matchup for the Yankees, a team that's had your number, that your franchise has not beaten since 2003 in that championship series in the playoffs. And now you got a manager matchup in Boone versus Cora, which, Cora obviously is a big elevator in this series for Boston. He always is against the Yankees. Boone's 0-3 against them in the postseason, including the one-game wild card that they played in 21. So you get them at home. I think the Yankees should win. I think they're a better team. My hot take for the AL, I don't know how hot it is because they won as many games as anybody. I think they're the best roster and team in this American League playoff, but we know how that goes if Crochet shuts you down tomorrow night and Boston does enough to win one more game after that.
Kevin, I don't think that's a hot take. I think the Yankees are the best roster. You lose me with any team in the AL Central if you're trying to make a case for that, but I don't think anybody that the AL Central being the best team in this American League, I think died back in August when the Tigers started this generational collapse. The other question is Aaron Judge going to pick up where he left off in Game 5 of the World Series and actually hit in the playoffs?
Yep, and that's the biggest thing for the Yankees. That's the biggest what if every year because it feels like the year he hits is going to be the year they win if it ever happens. I will say the one benefit to them maybe not winning the division is Judge was just on such a heater for the last month and especially the last 2 weeks. I wonder if now that he finally, for what feels like the first time in his career, doesn't have this week off after the season ends, if he can just carry the momentum into this series and continue to hit. He had a very unique year against Crochet. I think he had 4 hits off of him and hit like 160 and all four of them like 450-foot home runs. So he had a very interesting season versus Garrett Crochet. The Yankees have seen Crochet 4 times this year. Crochet's a 3.5 ERA against them, I think. So he hasn't been great, but he has had 2 phenomenal starts against them. So I'm worried for it because Crochet's really, he gives me that Chris Sale vibe from 2017, 2018 with Boston, where just that big lefty in that Boston uniform that's really untouchable.
That would be my worry, Kevin. Can I give you a stat comparison?
Yeah.
This has the potential to be the 2009 Alex Rodriguez postseason for Aaron Judge because this isn't talked about as much, but Alex Rodriguez for the New York Yankees prior to 2009, the championship run, and after that, for that matter, was very ineffective in the postseason. He had 420 against Minnesota his first series, with the Yankees, everybody hits over 400 against Minnesota when they're on the Yankees in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But under 260 against Boston in the ALCS, and most of those hits were correlated before the Red Sox started coming back from down 3-0. Then 3 straight playoff series hit under 270, 133 in the 5-game loss to Anaheim in 2005, under 100 in 2006, and 267 against Cleveland in a 4-game series where he only had 4 hits and only 1 home run, a solo shot. Then 2009, he hit 455, 429, 250, including 6 home runs in that postseason. So that is going to, and you guys were talking about the potential for Judge to have a Barry Bonds type postseason. And when it eventually comes, that's what the postseason conversation is going to be about Aaron Judge. And I also bring the comparison to A-Rod there because no one talks about how A-Rod kind of stunk it up for the Yankees in every postseason but 2009. They got the World Series with him. That's all anybody cares about. And I think that's Aaron Judge finally started to figure it out. And that's a very great point that you make about how he finally is beginning to feel him. Like he's finally not going to have a week off. And he's been feeling himself since the middle of September. So that's a very good thing for the Yankees.
And last year, Judge started terrible against Kansas City, did not have a strong series against Cleveland, had the 2 big home runs in the series, but really just did not have a good series. He actually, I think, only had the 1 home run. But Judge might just be a guy because we've seen so many slow April starts for him that just needs to be in the rhythm of playing. So I think that this week could be big. I'll ask you now, do you think he's the MVP? I know your answer, but
yes. The MVP is not a home run award. I have had this conversation on WCCU radio. I've had it with our production staff before our broadcasts here at Coastal. Cal Raleigh, and I'm kind of glad Cal Raleigh didn't set the home run record now because then I'd have to have the annoying conversation with everybody. Cal Raleigh hit 63 home runs. He should be the MVP. Is it still 180 points better in OPS for Judge? Because when we were having this conversation a week ago, Judge was 180 points better than Cal Raleigh in OPS.
It's Raleigh finishes with a 948 and Judge. So 948 to
Judge finishes 1144.
1140. Yeah, so do the quick math on that.
While you're doing the math, I'm going to make the point that this is 2017. Jose Altuve got the MVP over Aaron Judge in 2017 because he hit 346. That was the only significant offensive statistic that Jose Altuve was better than Aaron Judge in. Aaron Judge was better in all of the other offensive statistics, more home runs, better on base percentage, better slugging percentage. Cal Raleigh, and I don't care that Cal Raleigh is a catcher and plays a premier defensive position at a platinum glove level. You know what? That's why we have the platinum glove, because you say your defense is what is winning you. Your defense, there's an award to recognize that. And the other thing, we are not talking about a Kyle Schwarber type of player in Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge doesn't play minus defense. Kyle Schwarber, there should not be a conversation about him winning the MVP in the National League because all he does is a DH. He hit 50 home runs as a DH, but he is not a guy who goes out and plays a regular position in the outfield. So the two reasons, number one, is Aaron Judge is better in every offensive statistic that's not home runs and RBIs, and this is not a home run award. And number two, I really don't care about the premier defensive position because this is not a primarily defensive award. And if you want to say that makes it up, it should make up a part of it, but I'm not giving a guy the MVP award over Aaron Judge, who is better significantly. This isn't a marginal difference, by the way. If Judge was 10 points better in offensive statistic, in on-base slug OPS than Cal Raleigh, and Cal Raleigh had 7 more home runs than him, then you could make then I would listen to you saying, okay, well, Cal Raleigh should be the MVP. Judge is significantly better in everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, 196-point difference in OPS. So it was even higher than it was when I sent you that 2 weeks ago.
Almost 200 points.
And if you round up, some sites do round up, it's 197 just to be a stickler. So it's an unbelievable difference. And another thing with the Raleigh argument, and then we'll finish up this playoff bracket, but the Raleigh argument has so much of he's the first catcher to do this, he's the first switch hitter to do this, but he's not the first player to do these things. So you can try and isolate it as a catcher and a switch hitter, and of course it's history and it's an incredible season, but he's not the first player to do these things, and Judge is doing stuff that only, 1, 2, 3 guys have done to hit at the average that he hit at this year and finish with a 331 average in a year that only 7 or 8 guys hit over 300 in all of Major League Baseball. He finishes with a 331 average, 53 home runs, and 114 RBIs. The only 2 guys to ever do that, Mickey Mantle and Jimmy Fox, and that was in 1959 and 1956, I believe, or since 56 it hasn't happened. So Judge had an incredible season. We know that. He is not a minus defender. I think he's by far the most valuable player. And I just had one other point that I'm completely slipping on right now. Oh, I thought that John Boy Media made a great point the other day about the MVP race. And he said, think about just the narratives of it. And there's definitely a voter fatigue element to this. There's definitely a little bit of a disrespect to Judge, I think, and a desire to see the catcher and somebody new win it. But he said, if you dropped Luis Arias into the American League and he hit 53 home runs, he's absolutely winning the MVP. There's no question about it because the narrative is going to be so strong around Arias, who added the power to his game. But since it's the power hitter adding the contact to his game and hitting 331, it seems to have gotten less respect and credit. So I'll be upset if Judge doesn't win it, but of course he needs the World Series. I think he's going to win the MVP, though. I do.
Let me add one more point to this, and then we'll move on to the last series. The only comparable season that I can find in the modern era to this Judge season, I'm taking Barry Bonds out of it, because obviously that 2001 season is irreplicable. You're not going to replicate that year. Sammy Sosa hit 64 home runs in 2001 with a 328 average.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And we're talking about, steroid era versus guy who's, not on them. And how much do you want to count those guys? I don't know, but that's a great comparison. Yeah.
So you talk about that, and this gave me time because I didn't have Barry Bonds' average in 2001 handy. He also hit 328 with 73 home runs. But you talk about Jimmy Fox and Mickey Mantle. Those are guys who are playing in old era of baseball. This is the most impressive. This stretch by Aaron Judge, 22, 24, 25, is the most impressive stretch by any hitter in the history of this game, because it has never been harder to hit a baseball. And to hit 50-plus home runs with a 330 average, guys didn't do that in the eras in which there were heavy, or where average was still heavy. Guys would hit 450 home runs very infrequently. And when those seasons happened, their averages would be lower. This is very close to unprecedented. You have to get steroid era or go back to immediate post-World War II and even further back to find seasons like this. No player in the non-steroid era of modern baseball has done what Aaron Judge has done. So you lose me with, Cal Raleigh's doing something that no catcher has ever done before. Cool. Aaron Judge is doing something that no baseball player has done without the aid of PEDs. And as far as as far as Sosa and Bonds are concerned, I could care less that they use steroids, but just wanted to make that point.
And I agree with you there. But the other comparison that I had been able to come up with was 2013 Miguel Cabrera, who is not as close of a comparison as Sosa, but Cabrera in his age 30 season in 2013 led the league in average, hit 348, led the league in on base 442, led the league in slugs 636, led the league in OPS, of course, with 1,078, and then wins the MVP, but does not lead the league in home runs or RBIs that year. Chris Davis did with his infamous 50 home run season, led the league in RBIs, but Cabrera easily wins most valuable player because obviously the stats are just too good in that season to pass up. Interestingly enough, Judge's WAR finishes 2.5 points higher than Cabrera's that season because that's how great Judge's year was. It's just an unbelievable year.
And Chris Davis that year wasn't even the runner-up in the MVP award. Mike Trout was, because Mike Trout hit 27 home runs with a 323 average.
Yeah, Trout had an insane year this year too. But that, we'll see in a few weeks. So I'm hoping that the Yankees at least get through the first round of the playoffs, though, so that Judge can try and get a World Series. That's what means the most for him and for the Yankee fan right now. But we go to that last series, Tigers, Guardians. It doesn't really get much worse. They're putting these on during the day, during the week, which is always an insult to the teams playing. But yeah, Tigers, Cleveland, disgusting. I think Cleveland's going to win this series, but it's a gross one.
I don't even want to watch this series, to be honest.
I'm not going to.
I do not want to watch this series because the Tigers just complete. And again, the one more negative about the expanded playoff, Tigers having the greatest divisional collapse in the history of the game still make the playoffs because of expanded playoff format. And yeah, we can still laugh at them because they're going to get bounced by Cleveland after potentially being able to have a home playoff series. But I think you're right because the Guardians just are a devil magic team. It doesn't matter what year it is. And it can look like they're dead. It could look like they have the most inconsistent roster construction, whatever. They just find a way to win games. And they'll be the thing that's interesting is they'll be pesky to whoever they get in the division series because they pushed the Yankees to 5 games in 22. I know the Yankees handled them pretty easily in the league championship series last year, but Cleveland's going to win this series because I don't know how, as a Detroit Tigers roster, you can go into this series after having blown a 15.5 game division lead and win a series.
I'm going to ask this last question, which is totally irrelevant to what we're talking about, but I asked Mike last week what it was, and a lot has changed in just 10 days since I asked him. But if you had to vote on Manager of the Year in the American League, who would it be? Because I think you can make a case for the top 5 seeds. I don't think Hinch has any case, but you can make a case for the top 5 seeds. Schneider obviously was the best team, but in Seattle, Wilson did a great job getting them to where they were and winning that division finally. Boone did it without Garrett Cole, even though I don't think Boone has a shot at winning this award. Cora took a group without Devers. You get the whole gist. And Vogt would probably get mine, but, you know, they're not one of the 4 best teams in the league.
I'd give it to Dan Wilson. I'd give it to Dan Wilson for getting Seattle that division because I thought Seattle had no path forward in September. I'd give it to Dan Wilson based on the September that the Seattle Mariners had.
Okay, yeah, I can agree with that. So I got nothing else here, Sarge. It's going to be a good postseason. You want to give me a quick World Series prediction?
Yeah, I'm going to say this. I was completely wrong because I thought the Astros were going to devil magic their way into the postseason. And I even 2 weeks ago on WCCU radio, I picked them and the Phillies in the World Series. So I'm going to take Phillies, New York. I'm going to take the Yankees to go back to the World Series. I think they're going to get the series done against Boston. I trust them against Toronto, and then I don't trust Seattle to show up in a league championship series. So give me the Yankees. They've been battle tested. They've been there before. They'll go back. I think the Phillies have the best roster in the league, and in the entire league, not just the National League. I think they have the best roster in baseball. I think the Phillies are going to win the World Series in 6 games.
I think that it's going to be a rematch from last year. I think the Dodgers end up clawing their way through the National League. I think the Yankees do it too. And I will say this about the American League. I think whichever team comes out of the Yankees-Red Sox series will end up going to the World Series and just catch some lightning in a bottle and beat Toronto and then get probably what I'd call a favorable matchup against Seattle for an ALCS on the road. And then I think the Dodgers are the best team in the NL. I think they find a way to do it again.
I would certainly be happy about that, but I don't like the idea of playing the Red Sox in the World Series because Red Sox devil magic in the World Series is a thing.
It exists. It's a real thing. So hopefully it doesn't exist in the wild card round. But we'll wrap up here. Appreciate you listening. We'll be doing predictions tomorrow. Myself and Mike Merlo, of course, regular programming the rest of the way for BTO Media, and an awesome postseason coming up here. Sarge, thanks so much for jumping on. Appreciate it. We'll have you on, of course, again before the postseason or during the postseason, excuse me, or during the, right after it ends, during free agency. But that's going to be a wrap today. So we appreciate listening to The Bunker. I'll be back on Thursday. NFL Pick'em always. We'll do a little bit of baseball stuff. Burrows Tuesday and Friday this week. And then we will see you this weekend, Sunday recap and everything else that we usually have that's entailed in our weekend programming stuff. So find us Spotify, find it on YouTube, and we'll see you tomorrow morning for predictions.